The land stretched endlessly beneath the golden sky, a sea of rolling hills and sturdy oak trees that had stood for generations. The Johnson Ranch was not just property, it was legacy, history written in the soil, sweat, and tears of one family that had refused to abandon its roots. Horses grazed quietly in the distance, and cattle roamed lazily across the fenced pastures. To the Johnson family, this ranch was far more than land. It was a living memory of their ancestors who had fought through droughts, storms, and financial hardships to keep it alive. Inside the main farmhouse, an old two-story building with white wooden siding and a wide porch, lived 3 generations under one roof. Henry Johnson, the patriarch, had inherited the ranch from his father. His wife, Martha, ran the household with the kind of warmth that made guests feel instantly at home. Their children and grandchildren helped with the daily chores, feeding animals, mending fences, and riding out into the fields to check the herds. Every morning began with the sound of roosters crowing and ended with the sight of a crimson sunset glowing across the wide Texas horizon. Life was not luxurious, but it was rich in values: hard work, honesty, and unity. The family ate together at long wooden tables, told stories around the fireplace, and sang hymns on Sunday evenings. To them, this land was a promise, one they intended to keep for their children and grandchildren. But in every peaceful town, there comes a shadow. The Johnsons' quiet existence began to tremble when a new figure arrived in their county. His name was Victor Hale, though most referred to him simply as the Enforcer. He was a tall, sharp-jawed man with piercing eyes that seemed to measure everyone he looked at, not with curiosity, but with suspicion. Dressed in neatly pressed uniforms and carrying an air of authority, he was hired by the county's Land Use Enforcement Office to bring order to properties in the rural area. What he brought instead was fear. Victor had earned a reputation within weeks of his arrival. Neighbors spoke in hushed tones about his merciless inspections, his unreasonable fines, and his eagerness to threaten families with eviction for the smallest infractions. A broken gate, an unpainted barn, or even a pile of unused lumber stacked too close to a fence line could earn a citation. "He is not here to protect us," old Mr. Ramirez, a rancher from down the road, muttered one evening. "He is here to break us." The Johnsons had heard these warnings, but Henry was not a man easily intimidated. He believed that as long as his family followed the law, they had nothing to fear. He told his children, "This land has withstood storms worse than him. Don't worry yourselves." And for a time, it seemed that the enforcer's shadow might pass them by. Until the morning Victor Hale's Black County truck rolled slowly up the dirt road to their ranch gates. The sight of it sent a chill through Martha's heart as she watched from the kitchen window. Dust swirled behind the vehicle as it came to a halt, the county emblem gleaming on the doors. Victor stepped out, clipboard in hand, dark sunglasses hiding his eyes. He looked around with the precision of a predator scanning its prey. Henry walked out to meet him, wiping sweat from his brow with a work-worn hand. "Morning," he said evenly, though his voice carried an edge of caution. Victor did not return the greeting. Instead, he scanned the fences, the barn, and the fields as though each detail betrayed a hidden crime. "This property," he announced coldly, "is in violation of multiple county codes. Unless corrected immediately, the family residing here will be subject to fines and possible eviction." The words landed like thunder. Martha gasped inside the house, clutching the window frame. The grandchildren stopped their chores, frozen in fear as they watched from the porch. Henry squared his shoulders. "This ranch has been here for over 100 years. We've always kept it in good order. What violations are you talking about?" Victor smirked. "Fences not up to regulation height, storage of equipment improperly documented, possible zoning encroachments. I could go on." He tapped his clipboard. "You have 2 weeks to comply. If not, I will begin eviction proceedings." It was the beginning of a storm no one in the Johnson family could have predicted. And what Victor Hale, the enforcer, did not know was that hidden inside this very ranch lived a man who understood the law better than anyone else. A man who had once sat in marble-floored chambers, drafting the very statutes Victor claimed to uphold. A man whose quiet presence in the household was about to turn the tide of this battle. The enforcer had made his move, but the game had only just begun. The dust had hardly settled after Victor Hale's truck disappeared down the dirt road when the Johnson Ranch felt its first tremor of dread. His words echoed in everyone's mind. 2 weeks, or eviction. At the dinner table that evening, the mood was heavier than usual. Normally, supper at the Johnsons was full of laughter and chatter, stories of calves born that day who had outrode whom on horseback, or Martha's proud scolding about muddy boots dragged into her kitchen. But tonight, silence stretched long between every bite. Henry finally broke it. His voice was low, steady, but his jaw was tight. I have been on this land since I was a boy. My father before me, his father before him. Not once has anyone ever threatened to take it from us. Martha reached across the table and laid her hand on his. Henry, what if he means it? What if he can really do it? Her voice trembled, but her eyes burned with the fierce protectiveness of a mother hen guarding her brood. Henry looked around at his children and grandchildren, their wide, anxious eyes watching him. This is our home. I will not let some bully in a uniform frighten us. We've done nothing wrong. But deep down, even Henry could not shake the unease gnawing at his heart. The days that followed brought no peace. Victor Hale returned, clipboard in hand, pacing around their land like a wolf marking territory. He scribbled notes, took photographs of fences and barns, and issued new warnings each time. One morning, he claimed the Johnson's barn was structurally unsound and demanded repairs costing thousands. Another afternoon, he insisted their livestock count was over the legal grazing limit, though Henry knew the numbers had never changed. Each visit grew harsher, more hostile. He began addressing the family in tones dripping with contempt. This property is outdated. Families like yours are holding the county back from progress. His words cut deeper than his threats, painting the Johnsons not as citizens, but as obstacles in his personal crusade. The neighbors whispered louder now. Word spread quickly across the rural community that Victor had his sights fixed on the Johnson Ranch. Old Mrs. Henderson stopped Martha at church one Sunday, gripping her hands. Child, I have seen what that man does. He shut down the miller's place. They had no money to fight him. Don't let him break you, too. And then there was the Ramirez family, their ranch only a few miles down the road. Victor had fined them into bankruptcy over zoning issues no one had ever heard of. Their once busy pastures now stood empty, weeds swallowing the fences. The Johnson children had grown up playing there, but now it was a ghost land, an omen of what might come if Victor had his way. At night, Henry lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of coyotes howling beyond the hills. He had faced drought, debt, even the heartbreak of losing cattle to storms. But this attack was different. This was not nature's wrath or financial misfortune. This was deliberate, calculated, and it came wearing the false mask of law. The tension finally snapped one afternoon when Victor arrived unannounced, storming onto the property with 2 deputies in tow. He waved a folder thick with papers, his voice booming across the yard. This ranch is in violation of multiple county regulations. I am filing for immediate eviction. The children froze mid-chore, dropping their tools. Martha rushed out from the house, apron still on, clutching her Bible as if it could shield her family. Henry marched forward, fists clenched at his sides. You've gone too far, Hale. You cannot just take what isn't yours. Victor smirked, enjoying the fear rippling across the family. Watch me. The law is on my side." But as the enforcer basked in his self-declared victory, he failed to notice the quiet figure stepping out onto the porch. An older man, dressed simply in denim and boots like any other rancher, leaned on his cane as he descended the steps. His eyes, however, were sharp, commanding, and filled with a quiet authority that silenced the chaos in an instant. This was Samuel Carter, Martha's uncle. To most, he was just the quiet old man who had come to live out his days in peace on the ranch. But in another life, long before Victor Hale ever wore a uniform, Samuel had been one of the state's most respected legal minds. He had sat in legislative halls, argued landmark cases, and yes, he had written many of the very property protection laws now being twisted by men like Hale. As he walked closer, his voice carried across the yard, calm but cutting through the tension like a blade. "Is that so?" Samuel said, his gaze fixed firmly on the enforcer. "You claim the law is on your side. But tell me, young man, do you even know the law you're quoting?" Victor faltered for a moment, startled by the interruption. "And who might you be?" Samuel gave a small, knowing smile. "The man who wrote it." The ranch fell into silence. Even the deputies shifted uneasily, unsure of what to do. The battle lines had been drawn, but for the first time, it was Victor who looked uncertain. The storm had broken, and the Johnsons were no longer standing alone. The air seemed to thicken around the ranch yard as Samuel Carter stood face to face with Victor Hale. For years, Samuel had kept to himself, blending into the rhythms of ranch life as quietly as the wind across the fields. To the grandchildren, he was just Uncle Sam, the gentle old man who told bedtime stories and taught them how to mend tack with careful hands. To the neighbors, he was a polite, unassuming ranch hand who enjoyed fishing by the creek and reading thick leather-bound books on the porch at dusk. But beneath that calm exterior lived a mind sharper than steel. Samuel Carter had once walked halls of marble, not dusty ranch trails. He had studied at the finest law schools, clerked for federal judges, and argued cases that shaped the state's legal landscape. His name was whispered with respect in courtrooms and legislative chambers alike. For decades, he fought tirelessly for property rights, believing that no hard-working family should ever lose their land to the whims of corrupt officials or predatory developers. It was Samuel who had helped draft the Land and Property Protection Act 25 years earlier, the very law that secured the rights of ranchers, homeowners, and families against unjust seizures. It was Samuel who had argued before the state's highest courts, ensuring those laws were upheld. And it was Samuel who had eventually grown weary of politics, leaving behind prestige and power for a quieter life among the kin he loved most. The Johnson family had never boasted about who he was. Out of respect for his wishes, they simply called him Uncle Sam and allowed him the anonymity he desired. They thought his days of law and battle were long behind him. Until now. Victor Hale, unaware of the man standing before him, sneered. "And what makes you think you know more than me about the law, old man? This ranch is out of compliance. The paperwork proves it." Samuel adjusted the brim of his hat, his weathered face calm, his voice steady but firm. "Paperwork can be forged, regulations can be misinterpreted, but the law itself, that cannot be twisted, not while I still draw breath." Henry turned, his eyes wide as realization dawned. "Uncle, you mean to say—" Samuel placed a hand on Henry's shoulder, silencing him gently. "Yes, Henry. I know these statutes better than anyone. I wrote them." A stunned hush fell over the family. Martha covered her mouth with trembling hands, her eyes filling with tears of relief. The children gaped at their great-uncle in awe, as if they were suddenly seeing him for the first time. Victor, however, laughed harshly. "You expect me to believe that? That some washed-up rancher wrote the laws of this state?" Samuel's eyes hardened, and for the first time, a spark of the legendary fire he carried in courtrooms flickered to life. I don't expect you to believe me, son. I expect you to read the name on the very statutes you pretend to enforce." He reached into his coat pocket, withdrawing a folded document he always carried, a copy of the Land and Property Protection Act, signed and sealed. He opened it with deliberate care, pointing to the author's name at the bottom. Victor's eyes narrowed as he read, and for a flicker of a moment, his confidence faltered. The deputies beside him exchanged uneasy glances, realizing the gravity of what stood before them. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and the enforcer retreated in frustrated silence, the Johnson family gathered around Samuel in the living room. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting a warm glow across their faces. Martha clasped his hand tightly. "All these years you never told us the truth. Why?" Samuel sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Because power is a dangerous thing, Martha. I wanted a life where I was just a man among family, not a name in law books. I never wanted to burden you with the battles I fought." His eyes grew distant, shadows of old wars flickering across them. "But it seems my battles have followed me here, and now I must fight one more, for all of us." Henry's voice was firm, but laced with gratitude. "You are not fighting alone, Uncle. This is our land, and we'll stand by you." Samuel nodded slowly, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "Then we shall make him regret ever setting foot on this ranch." Outside, the cicadas sang, and the ranch slept under a blanket of stars. But inside, resolve burned stronger than ever. The Johnsons now knew who stood among them, not just an old man with stories, but the very author of their salvation. And the enforcer, blinded by arrogance, had picked a fight against the one man he could never defeat. The war for the ranch had begun. 2 days passed in tense silence. The Johnson family tried to keep their routines, feeding livestock, repairing fences, riding into the hills to check cattle, but beneath the rhythm of ranch life, unease lingered. They knew Victor Hale was not finished. The enforcer was a man who thrived on domination, and men like that never retreated quietly. Sure enough, on the third morning, the sound of tires crunching over gravel carried across the wide pastures. From the porch, Henry spotted the Black County truck pulling up the drive, this time not alone. A second vehicle followed, sleek, official, with county insignias plastered across its sides. Victor Hale climbed out, flanked by 2 deputies again, but now joined by a county clerk holding a thick stack of papers. He carried himself with the swagger of a man certain of victory. His voice rang out across the yard, sharp and commanding. "Johnson family, by authority of the County Enforcement Division, this property is hereby subject to immediate seizure due to non-compliance with land regulations. You have 24 hours to vacate." Martha gasped from the porch, clutching her apron as if the fabric itself could hold her steady. The children clung to her skirt, their wide eyes brimming with fear. Henry stormed forward, fists clenched, his face red with fury. "This is our land, Hale. You can't just waltz in here and take it." Victor smirked, lifting the folder of papers. "Oh, but I can. Every violation has been documented, every regulation broken. It's all here, signed and sealed. You have no choice." He turned to the deputies, gesturing toward the barn. "Post the notice. Tomorrow this property will belong to the county." And then, before the deputies could move, a steady voice cut through the chaos. "You are mistaken." All heads turned as Samuel Carter stepped out onto the porch, cane in hand, a folded briefcase under his arm. He descended the steps with deliberate calm, his eyes locked on Victor Hale. His presence, though quiet, commanded the yard more completely than Hale's shouting ever could. Victor's smirk faltered slightly, but he covered it with a sneer. "You again? Still playing lawyer, old man?" Samuel didn't flinch. "I do not need to play. I am." He approached slowly, opening the briefcase to reveal neatly organized documents bound and notarized. And I have here the very statutes you claim to enforce. Allow me to educate you, Mr. Hale, because it is clear you have not read them." The deputies froze, uncertain, watching the exchange like men caught between two storms. Samuel pulled out the first document, his voice clear and unwavering. Section 3, Article 12 of the Land and Property Protection Act. No county official shall initiate eviction proceedings against a property owner without first issuing 3 separate written notices of violation and granting a 90-day remediation period. He held up the enforcer's flimsy notice. "You issued one. That alone makes your actions unlawful." Victor shifted uncomfortably, but Samuel pressed on, pulling another paper. Article 9, Subsection 4. Agricultural properties maintaining livestock are exempt from standard residential zoning limitations. Your claim of overgrazing? Invalid! He snapped the page shut with precision. Victor's face reddened. That's outdated law. No one follows that anymore." Samuel's eyes narrowed, his voice cutting sharper. "Outdated? I wrote it. And it was reaffirmed by the state Supreme Court just 5 years ago." He placed the case firmly on the hood of Victor's truck, the thud echoing like a gavel strike. "You stand here, threatening this family with fabricated charges, when every action you have taken violates the very laws you swore to uphold." The county clerk shifted nervously, glancing at the documents Samuel presented. "Mr. Hale, he's right. These statutes are still in effect." The deputies looked uneasy now, their confidence crumbling. They stepped back slightly, no longer eager to follow Hale's commands. Victor's bluster cracked, his voice rising with desperation. "This is my jurisdiction! My authority cannot be questioned!" Samuel stepped closer, his gaze unyielding. "Authority without truth is tyranny, and tyranny has no place on this land." He lifted a phone from his pocket, already dialing. "As of this moment, I am filing an official complaint with the State Attorney General's office for abuse of power and unlawful harassment. You, Mr. Hale, will answer for this." The phone rang once, then connected. Samuel's voice shifted into the crisp, formal tone of a lawyer in his prime, delivering every detail with precision. Names, dates, statutes, all laid out like a master craftsman hammering nails into a coffin. Victor stood frozen, sweat beading on his forehead as the weight of his own downfall began to crush him. When Samuel ended the call, he looked directly at the enforcer. "Pack your papers and leave this ranch. The next time you return here will be in court." The yard fell silent except for the restless stamping of horses in the corral. Finally, with a snarl of frustration, Victor slammed his folder shut, stormed to his truck, and drove off in a spray of dust, his deputies and clerk scrambling to follow. For the first time in weeks, the Johnson family felt the air clear. Relief washed over them like rain after drought. Martha hugged Samuel fiercely, tears streaming down her cheeks. Henry gripped his uncle's hand, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved us, Uncle. You saved everything." But Samuel only shook his head, his eyes still fixed on the disappearing dust trail. "No, Henry. This was only the beginning. Men like him do not give up so easily. He will be back, and next time he will be desperate." And in that warning lay the promise of an even fiercer battle ahead. The ranch slept uneasily in the days that followed. Though Victor Hale had retreated in humiliation, Samuel Carter's warning echoed in every heart. He will be back. And indeed, Hale's pride had been wounded too deeply to heal. Humiliation was a wound he could not bear. Behind closed doors at the county office, he raged like a cornered beast, slamming doors and berating clerks. "That old man thinks he can outsmart me? He thinks he can embarrass me in front of deputies?" His voice thundered through the halls. "I will destroy that ranch, even if it takes every trick in the book." But Samuel was ready. At the Johnson farmhouse, Samuel transformed from humble ranch uncle into the seasoned lawyer he had once been. The dining table became his war desk. Papers, statutes, legal briefs, and case histories covered every inch. He worked tirelessly, his sharp mind weaving together every violation Hale had committed. Henry and Martha watched in awe as Samuel drafted complaint after complaint with the precision of a master craftsman. Unlawful harassment, abuse of authority, procedural violations, misuse of county funds, Samuel muttered, his pen scratching furiously. Each one is a nail in his coffin. Even the children helped, running to fetch old property deeds and family records stored in the attic. Samuel carefully assembled them into an unbreakable shield of evidence. But he did not stop there. He began calling former colleagues, judges, attorneys, even lawmakers who still remembered him with deep respect. Soon, whispers spread far beyond the county. A once-renowned lawyer had resurfaced, and he was preparing to dismantle a corrupt enforcer brick by brick. The confrontation finally came in the county courthouse, a grand building of stone and pillars where Victor Hale believed he reigned supreme. The courtroom was packed with townsfolk, neighbors who had once suffered under Hale's tyranny, ranchers who had lost land, families who had been silenced by fear. They all came, drawn by the promise that someone was finally standing up to the man who had oppressed them for too long. Victor swaggered into the courtroom, wearing his crisp uniform and a mask of arrogance. But when he saw Samuel Carter seated at the plaintiff's table, calm and resolute, his confidence cracked. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, called the case to order. Samuel rose slowly, his cane tapping the wooden floor, his voice clear and unwavering. "Your Honor," he began, "we stand here not merely to defend one family's ranch, but to defend the very integrity of the law itself. Mr. Hale has twisted statutes meant to protect citizens into weapons of intimidation. He has turned authority into tyranny, and I intend to prove it." Then Samuel began his assault. Page by page, he dismantled Victor's case. He cited statutes Hale had misapplied, rulings he had ignored, procedures he had bypassed. Every document Hale filed was revealed as flawed, every charge exposed as fabricated. Samuel's words rang with such authority that the courtroom sat spellbound. Even the judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing as she realized the depth of corruption unveiled before her. When Hale tried to interrupt, Samuel cut him down with icy precision. "You dare to claim authority?" Samuel thundered. "Authority without truth is not law, it is oppression. And I will not stand by while you trample the rights of honest families who have given their lives to this land." He held up the original Land and Property Protection Act, his own signature visible at the bottom. "This is the law. I wrote it to protect people like the Johnsons from predators like you. And today that law speaks louder than your threats." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The judge struck her gavel, demanding order, but even she could not hide the fire in her eyes. Finally, after hours of testimony and evidence, the judge delivered her ruling. "Mr. Hale, your conduct is a disgrace to your office. You have abused your power, violated the law, and attempted to strip citizens of their rightful property. Effective immediately, you are removed from your position. Furthermore, this court recommends a full criminal investigation into your actions." Gasps filled the room. Hale's face drained of color as deputies, his own former subordinates, stepped forward to escort him out in shame. His reign of terror was over. As the gavel fell for the final time, Martha wept openly, clutching Henry's arm. The children cheered, their voices echoing through the chamber. Neighbors approached Samuel, some shaking his hand, others with tears of gratitude in their eyes. For the first time in years, the community felt the heavy weight of fear lift from their shoulders. Samuel remained composed, though his eyes softened as he looked at the family he had fought for. "This victory is not mine alone," he said quietly. "It belongs to every one of you who stood your ground, who refused to bow to injustice." Outside the courthouse, the townsfolk gathered around the Johnsons, their cheers ringing against the stone walls. Hale's downfall was not just justice for one ranch, it was liberation for an entire community. And as the sun set over the courthouse that evening, Samuel Carter stood tall, cane in hand, not as a forgotten lawyer hiding in the shadows, but as the guardian of the very laws he had written, and as the protector of the family who had always believed in him. The Johnson Ranch was finally quiet again, but this time, it was a peaceful quiet, the kind that only comes after storms have passed. The fences stood tall, the barns gleamed in the morning sun, and the cattle grazed lazily across pastures that were once again safe. But the greatest change was not in the land, it was in the hearts of the family who had fought so hard to protect it. Inside the farmhouse, Martha prepared breakfast with a lighter step than she had in weeks. Henry leaned against the counter, watching their children bustle around with renewed energy, laughing as they fed chickens and collected eggs. For the first time in what felt like months, the ranch hummed with life rather than tension. The grandchildren ran outside to the fields, their laughter echoing over the hills, while Samuel Carter, calm and composed, sat on the porch, cane resting across his knees. He watched the family with a soft, knowing smile. Though his hands had once drafted laws in grand chambers, he had never felt a greater reward than this. The quiet strength of a family reunited with its land, safe from injustice. Word of Victor Hale's downfall spread quickly across the county. Neighbors who had once lived in fear now approached the Johnsons with gratitude and relief. Some shared stories of harassment, others admitted they had longed for someone brave enough to confront the enforcer. Samuel, ever humble, listened patiently, offering advice and guidance where he could. The community, once divided by fear, began to knit itself together. Families repaired fences and barns together, neighbors shared harvests, and slowly, the ranching community grew stronger than before. The Johnson Ranch became a symbol, not just of heritage, but of resilience, courage, and the triumph of truth over intimidation. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Henry and Martha walked to the porch, finding Samuel sitting quietly as he always did. "Uncle Sam," Martha said softly, "we can't thank you enough. You saved everything for us." Samuel shook his head gently. "I didn't save the land. I didn't save the family. You all did. I only reminded the world of what was already yours. Courage and integrity. They cannot be taken. They can only be ignored until someone stands up for them." Henry put a hand on his uncle's shoulder, pride and gratitude shining in his eyes. "We will never forget this. You've given us more than protection. You've given us hope." Samuel smiled, eyes crinkling with quiet satisfaction. "Then I have done my duty. Remember this always. Justice is not just a law written on paper. It lives in the hearts of those brave enough to defend what is right." The family stood together, silhouetted against the fading sunlight, the ranch stretching endlessly behind them, a testament to perseverance, courage, and love. The struggles they had endured had left them stronger, their bonds unbreakable, and their hearts full of gratitude. In the days that followed, life returned to its rhythm. Children ran freely across the fields, cattle thrived under attentive care, and the Johnsons continued their work with renewed purpose. The ranch was no longer just a home. It was a beacon for the community, a symbol that truth, law, and courage would always prevail. And Samuel Carter, the quiet man who had once preferred shadows, remained on the porch each evening, watching over the family he had fought for, knowing that the fight had been worth every ounce of effort. The legacy of the Johnson Ranch, protected by the wisdom of law, the strength of family, and the courage of one extraordinary man, would endure for generations to come. The sun set over the rolling hills, golden and serene, as if the land itself was breathing a sigh of relief. And in that light, the Johnson family, together and unbroken, understood the greatest truth of all. Justice may take time, but when it arrives, it brings hope, restoration, and an unshakable peace.